Home recording music is something that's becoming more and more accessible for a lot of musicians as time goes on. With only a few pieces of equipment and a lot of learning and practice, any musician can learn to record their own high-quality music. For most musicians, there's a few things you'll need to get started with recording, so in this video we'll take a look at 10 of the most important things you need for recording in the home studio. Before continuing, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon to get notified whenever our new videos are released. The first thing you'll need for recording is a computer. Most people will already have access to one that's good enough for recording, and most computers from at least the last 5 years should be capable of music recording, unless it was a very low budget computer. For this, you can use a laptop or desktop, and it can be either Windows or Mac. It's totally up to your preference since there is very good paid and free recording software available for both of these systems. There's even increasingly more options available for things like iPads to record on, but that's something we'll cover in a separate video. As far as what to look for in a computer, many newer processors are good and most people can get by with 8 GB of RAM, but more can be helpful if you plan on working with really large projects. To make our computer work as a home studio, we'll need to get some software installed on it. This software is called the Digital Audio Workstation, or DAW. DAWs work to connect to your music equipment, record audio in MIDI, process all the clips and effects, and mix it down into a final song that we can listen to or export as a high-quality audio file. When looking for a DAW, some things to consider are how easy it is to learn and use, and what sort of plugins and instruments come included. Another thing to maybe avoid is using demo versions such as Persona Studio 1.4 Prime and Pro Tools First. These types of programs have a lot of limitations that can really get in your way as you start progressing, and then you'll be stuck either switching software or being pressured into paying for a full version. DAWs are not the same as an audio recording program like Audacity. DAWs are able to work with more plugins in real time and feature non-destructive, non-linear editing, which means that all our plugins and mixing decisions can be changed since they don't process irreversibly to the track, and the clips can be cut up and moved around the song. There's many DAWs that are free, and that can depend on the operating system you're using, but two of my favorites are Traction Waveform and Cakewalk by BandLab. There's also a lot of paid software like Reaper and the industry standard Pro Tools, but you definitely don't need to use paid software when getting started. Once you find what DAW has the features you need, spend some time learning how to use it to get the most out of all the tools, and we have some tutorials for a lot of free software on this channel. The next thing is one of our most important pieces of equipment, and that's our audio interface. The audio interface is what connects our music equipment to our computer. It converts our analog microphone or instrument signal into digital audio, then converts the digital audio back to an analog output for the headphones or speakers. When buying an audio interface, the things to look for are how it's connected, the form factor and size, number of inputs and outputs, number of preamps, direct inputs, and other forms of connection. Most audio interfaces available now connect over USB, but some older ones had FireWire connections, and newer high-end audio interfaces may have Thunderbolt connections. USB is usually the right choice for most people. Next, consider the form factor of the audio interface. Most small audio interfaces are just desktop units that sit on the desk and have a few inputs or outputs. There can be various sizes like my Behringer UM2 here or my older Focusrite Scarlett 18i6. For larger audio interfaces with more inputs, many of them have the option to be rack mounted in a studio rack. In this case, I have mine set up in a rack with my other equipment like a power conditioner and guitar effects processor. Along with form factor, also consider how the audio interface is powered. Some small audio interfaces are fully powered over USB, while others require a separate power supply or power cable. One of the most important things to consider for an audio interface is the number of inputs it can record at once. This will be a big factor in determining what kinds of recordings you can do with the audio interface. Small audio interfaces with 1 or 2 inputs are great for recording a single instrument like a guitar or vocals, but are not very good when you need to record a more complicated setup like a drum kit, which often requires a minimum of 4, if not more than 8 separate microphone inputs to get isolated recordings. This is one of the main things that may lead you to choose a different audio interface down the road, so carefully consider this when making a decision. Along with the inputs, also pay attention to the number of preamps that the audio interface has. Some may advertise having a lot of inputs, but not all of those inputs will necessarily have preamps to power the microphones, and would instead just be direct line inputs. This may seem like a good way to save money in the short term, but buying extra preamps will definitely be more expensive than just getting an audio interface with those preamps to begin with. Another thing is some audio interfaces like mine will say they have 18 inputs, when in reality they only come with 10. That's because 8 of the additional microphone inputs are only available over ADAT, which is an optical connection on the back of the audio interface that lets us connect more inputs from another rack-mountable preamp device. In this case, I picked up a used Behringer 88-8000 for fairly cheap, but some of these units can add a few $100s of extra cost to your audio interface. Last, as far as inputs go, not all the preamps are created equal. Some are a lot noisier than others and just don't sound as good, so pay attention to the reviews on your audio interface and do your research. In my case, I've had fairly good luck with the Focusrite audio interfaces for their preamps. Along with preamps, the other type of input to look for is a direct instrument input. This is used to directly connect an electric guitar, acoustic electric guitar, or bass to an audio interface so you don't have to run it through an amp and record it with a microphone. This is a great way to do a lot of recordings, so definitely make sure that's a feature that's included, though most audio interfaces will have this feature in some way. Next up is the outputs. At the very least, an audio interface should have a headphone output and a speaker output. Headphone outputs are usually 1/4 inch, but you can use an adapter for 3.5mm headphones. The speaker output will depend on the audio interface. My Behringer unit has unbalanced RCA connectors, and the Focusrite audio interface has balanced 1/4 inch TRS outputs. Some audio interfaces will also have more than one headphone output, but you can also use a headphone amplifier if necessary to get more outputs. The last thing to look at are what other types of connections are included. Like we mentioned earlier, some may have ADAT connections for audio interface expansions. Other types of connections are SPDIF for digital audio processors like other effects units or guitar processors, and MIDI inputs and outputs for connecting MIDI hardware that doesn't work over USB. If you have the budget, get the audio interface for the recording setup that you want to have in the future and not the one that you plan on setting up immediately. This will ensure that you have all the features you need, such as enough inputs and outputs. This was a problem for me a little while back since I found my audio interface was too small for recordings like drums, and it wasn't rack mountable to go with the rest of my equipment, so I ultimately ended up upgrading to the Focusrite 18920, which has a lot more inputs and outputs along with built-in preamps for those inputs. In order to listen back to our projects and perform in time, we need some sort of way to monitor the sound coming from our computer. There's 2 basic ways to do this, and that's either with a good set of headphones or monitor speakers. Many people will also use both depending on their preference or setup. If you're only able to get one though, definitely get a good set of headphones. That way you can listen back to your music and record your instruments with a microphone without the microphone picking up the sound from the headphones. For me, I have a set of Shure headphones, but unfortunately I found that the plastic headband on these can break over time, but there's a lot of other brands to consider as well. In general, monitor speakers can provide you with a more accurate representation of your sound across all frequencies, but they can be a little more expensive. They also take up more space and are not suitable for everyone. Also, depending on your room, you may have to consider acoustic treatment if you're using monitor speakers. MIDI controllers allow you to record MIDI instruments such as synthesizers and electronic drums, or even control some things like volume and plug-in controls in your DAW. MIDI controllers send signals to your computer, usually over USB or MIDI cables through an audio interface. These signals then trigger an instrument on a MIDI track in your DAW to make sound, so the MIDI controller often doesn't make sound on its own unless it already has a built-in synthesizer. Many free and paid DAWs will have some basic MIDI instruments available with them to get you started, but there are also plenty of free and paid instruments that can be added to your software for more sounds. MIDI controllers usually take the form of a keyboard, drum pad, or even electronic drum kit. We can use these to create a lot of different types of electronic music, and it's often easier than creating music by drawing the notes on the piano roll. MIDI also allows for complete control over editing the performance afterwards, so we can add or delete notes, move them around in time, change the note value, or change how hard they were hit. One other thing some MIDI controllers can do is act as a control surface. Control surfaces send a MIDI continuous controller message to a digital audio workstation. The software can take the signal and use it to control settings like the knobs in your plugins with a physical knob on the MIDI controller, and some software will even allow you to record these changes throughout the song as automation. This is definitely a worthwhile feature to consider. For my MIDI controller, I use an Akai MPK249 since it has a lot of the features I talked about that I look for in a good MIDI controller. This controller has 49 keys, 16 drum pads with pitch bend and modulation wheels. For automation, we also have 8 faders, knobs, and switches. Microphones can be used to record any acoustic instrument in the room, like our guitars, voice, or drums. There's many different types of microphones available, but the 2 main types are dynamic microphones and condenser microphones. Dynamic microphones and condenser microphones are a little different, since condenser microphones need 48-volt phantom power to work, but this is provided through any audio interface with a microphone preamp. This power allows these condenser microphones to be more sensitive than dynamic microphones. Many microphones can be used for a lot of different things, and the types you choose will depend heavily on what instruments you want to record and your budget. There are plenty of microphones for different budgets, all the way from cheap Neewer condenser microphones to more expensive microphones that can cost hundreds or even thousands of dollars. There are more specialized microphones as well, like this Shure microphone that's basically only used for recording kick drums. For most people though, you can usually get yourself a good microphone to start off with for $100. If I could start with just 2 microphones, I would probably pick up one condenser microphone that I would use on instruments like acoustic guitar and vocals, then get a dynamic microphone that I can use on an electric guitar amp. Some of the common home recording microphones I have are the Shure SM57, which is a great dynamic microphone for recording amps and snare drums, and the Audio-Technica AT2020 for recording my voice. Microphone stands are used to mount the microphones we're using in a variety of positions for recording. My recommendation is to get a few boom stands since they allow you to get the microphone in whatever position you need it. I prefer tripod stands to the weighted base since I find them to be compact to store while still fairly stable. Also, it's good to have a low-profile microphone stand around like this one since it allows you to record things on the ground that the other microphone stands might not reach. I usually use this on guitar amps or the kick drum. All our audio equipment in the home studio has to be connected together with various cables. The most important ones we use for music recording are XLR cables, which are these cables with the 3 pins on the end. These are considered a balanced cable, meaning that they have a way of transmitting the signal while also cancelling out the noise that an unbalanced cable would normally pick up. The length of cable you need will depend a lot on the space you're recording in, but for me I find 20 to 25 feet to be a fairly good length for the home studio, though I do also have a few 50-foot cables. If you're connecting audio equipment together, then shorter cables should be used. You'll also probably need some 1/4-inch instrument cables to connect the instrument to the amplifier or directly to the audio interface if you're doing direct recordings, but most people will already have those if they play the instrument. A pop filter is an absolutely essential piece of equipment for any voice recording. When recording voice with a microphone without a proper pop filter, you can get these blasts of air with certain syllables that create a popping sound in the recording. These sounds are much louder than the original signal, making them very difficult to remove, and they can even cause clipping. Pop filters are a very cheap and easy way to fix this, and they can be used with pretty much any microphone stand. They simply clamp to the metal of the microphone stand and then can be adjusted in position to be a few inches in front of the microphone. The last thing we may need for home recording is acoustic treatment, but this is optional depending on your setup and whether or not you have dedicated space for recording music. If your room is fairly empty, it may have a lot of reflections in it which can interfere with your recordings or playback over monitor speakers. Some acoustic treatments can be set up for fairly cheap, and I previously made a video on one set of cheap acoustic panels. That was by no means a professional setup, but it did help a little bit with the reflections in the room. Acoustic treatment can also be fairly expensive for proper acoustic panels, but what you spend on that will depend on your budget and how well trained your ears are, since it needs to be helpful for you to do. For more portable or budget setups, there are also reflection filters that can be placed around a microphone directly, or you can even use the trick of hanging blankets around the microphone to absorb some of the sound. Thanks for checking out this video on 10 things you need for a home recording studio. If this video helped you out, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and press the bell icon to be notified whenever a new video is released. You can also check the video description for products featured in this video and social media links.